it all begin for you? When did you first find out that you could preach?
Well, I became a Christian as a student back in 1975, and I just started telling people about Jesus just kind of naturally. I thought that's what people did anyway. And then somebody said to me, "Oh, you're an evangelist." And I was like, "Oh, what's an evangelist?" And then they told me. And then somebody said to me, "Oh, you're like Billy Graham." And I said, "Well, who's Billy Graham?" Because obviously I'd only just heard of Jesus. I hadn't heard of Billy Graham. And it was only probably after I was kind of zealously, enthusiastically, probably quite tactlessly doing it, that I realised, oh, there's a word for this, and it's called doing the work of an evangelist.
So that's how you found out you could do it.
Yes.
What was it that made you become a Christian? You said as a student. I mean, can you remember the moment? Can you remember the time, how it happened?
Yeah, I met a Christian called Andy Economides, who is an evangelist today, still is,
Yes.
and he spoke to me about Jesus. He gave me a Bible, told me to read the Gospels. I'd never read them before. I'd never read the Bible before. And then there was a process, but there was a crisis. And my crisis day was 9th of February 1975, when he showed me the passage in the book of Revelation, Jesus stands at the door and knocks.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me was my tipping point. And I understood it, but didn't fully comprehend everything, but enough to say, well, Jesus, I want you in my life.
A very specific moment. You can actually tell me the exact
yeah.
date. Do you think that happens for everybody, or do you think with some people it's perhaps more of a process? Do you think everybody has to have that kind of road to Damascus moment, as it were?
No, I don't. I think we all have different journeys, but I think we should all be able to say, I mean, I can't remember the day I was born, but I was, because there seems to be evidence to suggest it.
Yes.
So I think you don't actually have to know the date, but is there evidence to suggest that you are connected to Christ?
And that evidence is?
Well, if the Spirit is living in you, then the Spirit should be producing the fruit of the Spirit, which is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Those would be some of the signs that God's Spirit is working in your life.
And do we display those spirits all the time? I mean, what are you like first thing in the morning? Are you full of joy and love and peace and patience and things?
It's difficult to say that do we display them all the time, but I suppose our lives ought to be characterised by the evidence of the working of your Spirit, of God's Spirit in your life. And I suppose that's something we don't talk about, do we? But if you think, if somebody's been a Christian 5 days or 5 months or 5 years or 15 years, the big question is, how fruity are you?
Said with a smile.
Yes.
You have a very distinctive style of preaching, a very dynamic style of preaching. I mean, all those lovely words I used about you in the introduction, I've heard you preach, I've seen you in action. How have you developed that over the years, that very personal style?
Well, I've always tried to be myself. I think that's the thing. I think when you try and be someone else, then it gets really difficult. But I've always just tried to be myself. And I just see the funny side of life, the funny side of church, the funny side of Christianity. And I just, conversationally communicate it. I use a lot of stories, but it's interesting that it was said of Jesus that he never spoke unto them without using a parable, without telling a story. And I think there's something powerful about stories and parables and pictures that kind of connects with people.
You've had some amazing results, haven't you? I mean, I'm thinking of the one, was it Coventry, where you talked about on the Ten Commandments about not stealing, and people filled wheelie bins with stuff. That was amazing.
Yeah, incredible. Well, I've done, back in the year 1999, we're about to go into a new year, new millennium, and I was convinced, God said to me, preach the Ten Commandments. And so I did that series on the Ten Commandments called Just 10. And the first time I did it, I do them in reverse order. So I did coveting, then I did lying, and then I got to stealing. And I just felt, we ought to do something. So I said, well, look, like Zacchaeus, let's return our stolen goods. And I said, if you can't return them to their rightful owner, we'll have amnesty dustbins. So I've done this series 23 times. And Oh, so far, something like £250,000 has been put into the dustbins, and jewellery and antiques and computers and hotel bathrobes and library books. And all of it goes to hospitals, homeless shelters and hospices.